So, Dom.
Hello.
We've just done our first podcast off air.
Yeah.
Because we've been waiting for Dougie to get set up.
He took a while, didn't he?
He did, but now he's got it ready and it's looking amazing. And it was good to catch up
Yeah.
before the cameras are rolling. You've already looked at the questions and you've already come out with half the answers.
I have, yeah. I like to be prepared.
You are now.
Yeah.
So, how did we first meet then, Dom?
Wow. Funny you should ask. I got invited to a quartet event where you and some young people and some staff were going to talk about GAP.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know what it was about, but I saw South Bristol youth work and a call out for support with it. And I thought, that's what I better go to it. And I didn't know. It seemed to be a meeting of great and the good and providers. And I didn't know when I got there if I was the great and the good or a provider.
Oh, you are.
But importantly, you said to me, I'm a youth worker and I do youth work. And it's really weird talking to people and asking for money for things. And I'm used to talking to young people and seeing what they want to do. And I don't really do social media. So you've invited me to this on LinkedIn and you're a YouTuber. So things
We
change.
use that loosely. The podcasts go on YouTube. But you're right. I mean, I suppose that does show, doesn't it? The journey of people when you're starting to do something and you've got the, I don't know, a core kind of aim that you're trying to do for good.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to adapt to the things you need to do sometimes, which aren't necessarily your strong points, your skills at that point. And and that is that journey. I wouldn't say that I'm the person to be talking to the great and the good. I'm not sure I necessarily get the amazing response that I would hope for.
How many people do you get watch these?
I got no idea.
Millions.
I wouldn't go
reckon.
that far.
Hundreds.
I don't know, maybe, yeah. I don't know, but I guess the thing is you've got to try, haven't you? And if you're doing it for the right reasons, then it's the right thing to do. Well, thanks for pointing that out.
That's all right. We've got to grow, haven't we?
Yeah,
I mean, we've done it all our lives in growing, and that's what we're teaching young people. It's try things that aren't necessarily the easiest. Don't listen to the voices. Do something new, and then try and adapt it.
And learn from the things that don't work so well. And that is just a constant, ever-evolving cycle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow, I can't wait to take you back to the beginning of your cycle, because this is going to be interesting. So, Dom, what was it like for you growing up when you were a young person? What was the positives? What was the challenges?
Yeah.
Could be at home, at school.
Yeah. So I grew up in Kent. I don't come from Bristol. I grew up in an ex-council house with my mum and dad, and I was a late life mistake. My mum thought that all the kids were about to leave and they get to go on holiday and do things. And my siblings are between 11 and a half and 16 years older than me. So, it was a great family. My dad was a teacher. My mum cut hair at home. They were great, if not wanting to go on holiday and not necessarily wanting a small child, but they were brilliant. A bit like growing up alone. School was easy for me. I had a gift for maths, logic, and a little bit for sport. I was all right at sport. And I found it really easy, but maths really easy. But I kind of got in a bit of trouble at school.
What do you mean, kind of?
They didn't want me to go to the lessons.
Right.
Disruptive behaviour kind of thing.
You shocked me.
Yeah, it shocked me. But they wanted me there because they thought I would go to Oxbridge universities and I might do a bit of sport and things like that. I didn't. I came to Bristol. It was miles better. But so if you're good at something, you're lucky sometimes at school. And if you can do that bit about logic and learning, it works for you. There are lots of people that doesn't work for and that system doesn't work for. And that's a lot of what I see today and try and make a difference to. Well, yeah.
So the education system, by the sounds of it, as much as you found certain things easier and you were good at certain things, the system didn't work for you? Is it fair to say that? Or is it more you just didn't want to pursue education in that way? I mean, we go into what you did pursue when you got to Bristol.
It was education. It was education. But no, I mean, I guess for me, I didn't want to sit still and learn stuff, and I preferred playing around with other people and messing about and being a bit of an idiot. Because it wasn't for me, that environment of the schoolroom, I don't think. So I came to Bristol to go to university. What did I do? I took a couple of A levels. I took an S level.
At university?
No, at school.
Right,
at
okay.
School.
I was going to say.
I didn't go to lessons. I just took the exams. That sounds a bit arrogant. I don't mean that in an arrogant way. So if you can do maths, you can do maths, in my view.
Right.
I came to Bristol to do maths. I hate maths. Like my brain works that way. But
so you come to go to the University of Bristol to mathematics or whatever. Okay, wow.
And what I'd say about that experience is it's what a great way to come to a new city. You're with thousands of people. Your accommodation's looked after. Out of those thousands, you like 3 of them. And, it's quite an easy way to make a big change in your life. So, went there, didn't like maths, didn't really do it, didn't go to my lectures.
That's a theme.
Yeah. I had a special tutor who suggested to me that I should leave. Really, I mean, he kind of said things.
And why? Because you weren't attending, or
because I wasn't
of
attending.
How you were acting.
Yeah, because I wasn't attending. I mean, it's quite hard at university to know where you're acting, isn't it? Because they're not really connected to you. You turn up at lectures, or you don't.
Be honest, and on reflection, what is the reasons why you haven't necessarily engaged in university, in school? Is there when you look at it more so, is there probably other reasons that maybe are underlying that why you feel like you didn't engage? Because I know you flippantly flied through this and gone, I just couldn't really be bothered. I got into a couple of scrapes and there we go. I was good at maths.
Yeah.
But I'm sure, as you know, for all the work you do in over many years, there's normally kind of root causes and underlying things that may instigate some of our behaviours. Do you think there's anything that might have instigated that?
I think that what I was good at and what I was pushed at wasn't what engaged me as a person. And in my first year at uni, I found out that there was this thing called psychology. I'd never really heard of it.
Right.
And I started doing lectures in psychology. And in the first term, and I loved it. Hated maths, loved psychology. First term of next year, I was doing psychology, more courses. I've managed to do half psychology and had to keep a bit of maths. Yeah. And I wrote to Kent County Council because in those days, my mum and dad had retired. They didn't have enough money to pay for me, and so we got a full grant. So I wrote to Kent County Council, asked for a full grant to do the extra year to do psychology because I loved it. Put some glowing words about how I loved it in there, and they wrote back a page and a half that really was no, psychology is not a subject. And that was it.
It's not a subject?
Yeah, according to them, yeah. Well, that's what they were saying. They used much better sentences than that.
Yeah.
What they actually said in it is if I was swapping from psychology to maths, they'd pay me, Kent County Council. But if they...
because they didn't feel like it would be something that would kind of help whatever their offer would be in their kind of area that they support.
There's quite a drive for maths and English, isn't there?
But I mean, bloody hell, you would have thought with all social services and a million other things that there's going to be an understanding of, well, maybe you were ahead of the curve and that was just a sign of the times. I mean, what kind of...
It has changed now.
What kind of time was that? Was that like the...
It was in the... How old am I? Yeah, it was in the 80s. It was in the... I came here in 87.
Okay.
And I left obviously 3 years later on.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I wonder, something you just said a minute ago, and it links in really with the next question. And you kind of said that you were directed towards something you didn't really want to do. And this is a question we always ask people, is about whether you felt like your voice was heard when you were growing up. Different time, I know. Do you feel like your voice was heard in any meaningful way? Because it sounds like you were directed to things you didn't want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't even know that I thought about having my voice heard.
Well,
and I think that's it. So, I mean, you went to school, you did your subjects if you were good at something. That was obviously what you do, and that's where the encouragement went. My dad was a maths teacher as well. That probably didn't help.
The plot thickens.
Yeah, so
genetics.
It probably doesn't help like that. So, but for me, it was the easiest route. Why not go and do something that I can do that I find quite easy, and you don't have to revise for, and you don't have to do much for. I mean, you clearly there's a bit of learning, but
I mean, I'd say something here then. If what you just said is that there was something actually that you wanted to do and you wasn't directed towards, that if your voice was heard, I don't even know if you even would have vocalised that at that point.
Yeah.
Then maybe your path would have been different, and it would have directed you towards something you wanted to do.
But you're quite young, aren't you? I don't think I was thinking like that.
Well, I don't think I was taught to think.
I don't think we were taught I'm not saying you're not my age, but I don't think we of that age were taught to think quite a lot.
Well, I wasn't either. Yeah. That was like about 20 decades after.
Yeah.
Not entirely true. But yeah, no, I know what you mean. Well, what's interesting is you've gone to university. You're obviously in Bristol. I'm guessing you've stayed in Bristol since then. How did you get into youth work? Can you now start talking us through your career, what you've done, the things that have worked well, the things that could be improved, and all this kind of stuff is basically to help us try and inform things that can help us all, do better work with young people as time goes on.
Yeah. So what happened was when I was at uni, I worked every summer in the building trade. I worked all summer because you ran out of money. I didn't have to take a loan. Those things didn't happen. You had your rent paid, but I had to work all summer. So I worked in the building trade. I went back to Kent at the end of the university and the building trade had collapsed. There were no jobs. And my dad wanted me to do things like get up in the morning and go to work and do stuff like that. So I came back to Bristol. Again, easy choice. But I love Bristol. I've always loved it. And I signed on for a couple of weeks, and the person who lived in the flat underneath me used to work at Jamaica Street Hostel for the homeless. And weirdly, having not seen him for, I don't know how long, 30 years, he was on a virtual meeting with me yesterday, lives in Australia. I said, are you still the Jerry Ham who gave me a 2-week job in 1991 or whatever that was? And he was like, yes, I am. So we had a little chat, and we're going to talk about homelessness because he works in homelessness in Australia. So I went there to work for 2 weeks, and I really enjoyed working with people. I really enjoyed the having to react to things. And I'll tell you, I mean, amazing things to think about the difference between my age and any young people now. I was there when we introduced the internet and email. I used to love memos. They're just like an email, but you leave them in someone's post tray. But I remember at the time, big National Housing Association, and I was like, well, yeah, let's get the internet and email. And they're like, internet, it's not going to go anywhere, is it? We'll get email because then we can find out whether people owe us money. So that was that. And actually in what is now Independent People, introduced email and the internet as well. So different age, different time. Well, I loved it. I love working with homeless people, and people I went to university now who talk to me about what I've done in my life. They say, looking back, it's really obvious. When we went to go anywhere, you used to spend your whole time talking to people on the street and sitting down and talking to them. And we used to have to wait for you, and we wondered what you were doing. One of them said to me, he sponsored me to do an event recently, and he said, what I realise now is I was arrogant, and we were getting pissed, we were getting annoyed with you for having to wait, and you were sat talking to somebody on the street. I mean, just because I talk to people on the street, it's because they had something interesting to say. It's not because I had a vision that I wanted to work in homelessness. So I did this 2-week job, really liked it, went for a permanent job. They turned me down, was determined that I'd dislike the person who got it because I really wanted the job. But actually they came to me to ask me all the questions how to do it. And I said to them, why are you asking me? And they said, because you actually answer the questions. It's clear you know what you're doing. Which was a little bit galling, but then went for the next job. Worked there.
I've been there before.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm still there now, actually, in some ways.
But yeah, loved it. First thing I had to do was run a 5-side football team in St Paul's Settlement, I think it was called then, with Judah. Judah. Okay. And yeah, it was great. But I realised that what I really wanted to do was work with young people, and what I actually really wanted to do was work with naughty young people, because I realised that all of that energy that can go into directions that are quite disruptive, like I was in class, or damaging. If you can see, if you can be, or someone can be the relationship that makes that young person see there's something to strive for that they really want, and they put that energy in that direction instead, they can really fly. And it's not to say that that older people can't, but there's a couple of things with that. One is, older people get quite entrenched, so it's harder to change things. And years later on, I know this, and I probably should have known it from psychology, but neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity, you probably know, is the ability for your brain to adapt and learn. And when you're young, you can learn loads of things. When you're older, as I'm trying to now learn Swahili, it's a bit more difficult. It goes slower. But up to 25.
Did you just say you're trying to learn Swahili?
Yeah.
Now he just slips his
I
finger.
we'll come on to that.
We
later.
will.
I might be climbing a mountain, you never know. But anyway, the neuroplasticity, there's another burst in your early 20s. So that is the time. Youth and early 20s is the time to get people to really repair the damage that's been caused by trauma in their lives, or to work out new paths and new ways to do things. And I learned that values are important as well, which I never believed in. So having something to aim for is the core of work with young people. Is like, what is it you really want to do in life, and how can you see a way to do that? And probably should have learned it myself.
Well, you did learn it yourself, but you learned it after those, probably that age range, and then you realised that it could support others.
Well, that's only if you think I want to be a chief executive of a youth homelessness organisation. Maybe I want to fix motorbikes.
Well, maybe you do. Well, you can always do it, because there's
True.
nothing stopping you.
I can't. I've tried. I'm useless.
Your
My hands
knees
go
might
like
get.
that.
I was going to say there's a lot of bending down. Take me back then, because when you started doing the roles with young people, and it was all around housing and homelessness, youth homelessness. What areas were you working in? What were the things that worked well back then with supporting young people? Kind of try and paint a bit of a picture of that time.
Yeah. So as I paint it, what I'll say, I hope, and get across is that actually people always know how to work with young people, but it gets psychologized, or and new frameworks are built up around things that lots of us have known for years. So I started with what was called South Bristol Youth Housing, and then Priority Youth Housing, and I worked based in Bedminster. They had an office, and I worked particularly in the estates in South Bristol, so Knoll West, Withywood, Hartcliffe. And I used to spend a lot of time with the youth centres, because there were loads of youth centres and loads of youth workers then.
Yeah.
And I knew the families. I knew what was going on for those families. I knew the siblings of people who'd had difficulty. And what worked was giving people a safe place to stay. The ability to feel safe and then start their self-healing, regulating their emotions. Putting people around them who were good role models. That doesn't need to be a worker. It might be anybody in the community. We've learned that over years. It can be, might be a policeman, might be the postman, might be your auntie.
Exactly.
Do you know the postman? Is that why you look that way? Is that
Postman
he's
Pat
great.
just flew past the window.
It could be anybody like that, but it only takes one relationship to change the direction of someone's life. And actually, it's about being there and doing practical things and doing what you say. And all those things have always worked.
But at this point then, so who you were working for, was that a government initiative, or was that voluntary
It's
sector?
the same organisation as I work for today. I started there in 1996. Voluntary.
It was voluntary sector, okay. So, but did you have, because I feel like the thing that comes up with chatting to a lot of people that have been doing similar things for a long time is time is huge. The amount of time you've got to build those relationships, to understand the community, to know who the role models are, for the young person to feel safe and to open up to you, so then you support them with the pathways that are needed. At that point, I don't know what the voluntary sector would have been like, because I would have been probably going to youth clubs.
As if.
But I only say it because it's obviously a thing, isn't it? So how was that work? Was it? Did you have lots of time to do it? Talk us through that.
Okay, so in those days, youth homelessness and our charity were probably quite distinct in the fact that money came from central government, and it was there, it was guaranteed, and it gave you a lot of time to work with young people in homelessness crisis. And what we did at the time then was pretty much housing with support going in all over the place. In fact, more than South Bristol. But that was it, mixture of flats, self-contained flats and shared houses. And when a housing association wanted to build somewhere, the local authorities say to them, where's your supported housing? What are you doing to do anything other than social housing? And they'd say, well, what's the need in the area? And the local authority would say, well, young people, there's quite an issue with young people becoming homeless and not having support in this area at the moment. So when you do a young person's house, go and talk to Don or whoever it was at the time in South Bristol Youth Housing. Then that money would come in. You got, as a youth provider, you got to do the really important tasks like choosing the colour of the carpet and the paint. And then that property would be there and you'd support, I don't know, 8 people, 10 people on a workload, maybe a bit more.
But what was the period of time? Was it open-ended to supporting them for what they needed, or was it like, 12 weeks, 6 months? Was there like a standardised kind of...
There was a view that it would be up to 2 years. And in those days... Whoa.
I mean, I'm doing that because it's like, those were the days. Go on. That's amazing.
And in those days... housing was easy as move on. So you'd work with someone until they were ready to move on, and then they'd move on, and it would be easy to get affordable accommodation for a young person who was ready to live on their own. And they'd probably come back to you a few times and, just
the challenges as well that they're facing.
And they had youth centres and youth clubs around them, and they had other people all around them supporting it. So it was... we all work together to make that work.
There was an ecosystem, wasn't there? There's a rich, network of support of people, by the sounds of chatting to different people, and where the doors were open because people were there full time, and that was always part of the ethos, wasn't there? That you're always there. I mean, the difference that must make.
So the changes in that, in terms of putting it towards youth centres, we all know what happened to youth clubs and youth work and how the money was cut down massively in those ways. What happened with the money from central government was they didn't want to do it that way anymore, and they wanted to put it through local authorities, and local authorities would understand the need. And local authorities, want to do the right thing. They do. So that money was transferred, and there was a really weird bit of time as it was being transferred that you could grow homelessness services massively. It was something called transitional housing benefit. And as long as you knew that there was someone who was struggling in accommodation, and the local authority would say who these young people were, or housing associations would say who they were, and you could get them to sign up, you could get their support money at that very finite period through something called transitional housing benefit. And then when the money fully changed, it became the local authority's responsibility. So weirdly, you could grow services massively in this finite window, but only by getting people to sign up saying they would want the support and what kind of support they wanted. So I spent many an hour walking around South Bristol estates, knocking on doors, saying, "Hey Ben, I hear you might want a bit of help with your housing. We can do that, and this is what we could do. But I'm kind of under pressure. It'd be great if you sign this form, and then we'll allocate you a support worker, and we'll do that." And that's how you grew services.
Well, how many people would be in a house that would be overcrowded that have whatever? Do you know what I mean? Like, not necessarily the real kind of hardcore things. And there would be a lot with those hardcore issues going on that would go, yeah.
But also there were people who were, who's that knocking on the door? Let's take my glasses off and have a word with him as well. So there were some interesting times in the transitional housing benefit period. But that grew services massively. And then from then on, the trouble is that local authorities have got less and less resources. And then those resources, they have to do the things like prioritise who gets those resources, and then they have to work out that you might have timescales for people that don't work. In homelessness, timescales of working with people these days is funders, local authority funders, to get the best bang for their buck would like it to be as quick as possible. But there's no housing. So actually you end up working with people in situations because they can't move on. And there's a load of people who really need that housing. And until someone moves out, they can't move in. And because the pot shrunk so much, there's just this whole silting up going on.
So I don't want to fast track things because I don't know what else is going to come from your journey. But it feels like now, and we'll go back and pick up, but it feels like that now you've got this provision that hopefully should be supporting people into housing. The housing doesn't exist. So then what are the housing organisations doing? It sounds like then you're supporting those young people in that transition between getting into housing, and I guess through youth work and a variety of other things, which I know you'll talk about in a bit. But the end goal doesn't really exist.
There is a massive issue. I mean, there's an enormous issue with affordable housing in Bristol and in other areas locally. And we did much more than housing. We grew and grew, and we realised that
Well, let's go back to the beginning of it then, because I think we're going to get to that probably in its journey. So it sounds like you got to a situation where independent people was born out of what you just spoke about.
Well, we still weren't independent people, but there was a bigger organisation.
How did that?
So, I mean, one of the people who's an absolute brain is Jamie Gill, worked for an organisation in South Bristol. You met him.
Yeah.
We'll
mention that in a minute.
he turns you down for a job, I heard. But,
what a mistake that was, eh?
But he's amazing. Vision, amazing. Just at looking at bringing all things together and how to work. And he came in with the South Gloucestershire service. And we've grown services forever since then into fitting in what young people need and what's not being provided. Your question was, how did we grow? We grew at that point. And then in 2009, there'd always been 2 or maybe 3 youth homelessness organisations in Bristol. One of them was in South Bristol, which was us, then called Priority Youth Housing. One was in East Bristol, called East Bristol Youth Housing. We were really clever with the names.
I'd tell you what, dynamic.
Yeah. It's almost like young people chose them. It's like, no, they choose much better names and name choosing I'll come on to. But for ages, it hadn't made sense for there to be 2 bigger organisations. But what sometimes happens is charities become what people want to run as opposed to the delivery of services. And sometimes that gets in the way of things growing and evolving in the right way. And then one day there was clearly a decision between boards that everything that we'd been asking for ages was the thing to look at, which was merging the 2 organisations. So we spent ages merging 2 organisations. Well, that is really quite a thing that you have to take on. The biggest thing is culture, and people never think about that. The biggest thing...
No one likes change.
It's sort of that. The fear, everything that comes with that. And then suddenly we became one city-wide and South Gloss and kind of west of England area, whatever you want to call it, Cuba, counties that used to be Avon, organisation. Mainly Bristol, South Gloss, but increasingly services in the other areas. I'm doing this quite a lot, aren't I? Yeah. It's like puppetry. and
or dancing.
Yeah, one or the other. Dad dancing, that's what people say about me. But so doing that, we clearly talked to young people about what they needed, what they wanted, what the future was, and what the name would be. And young people wanted to be called independent people because that's what it was about for them, was supporting young people to get independence and move on to what they wanted to do. And there was a company in Newcastle that did IT that was hadn't filed its returns for ages, called Independent People, and we couldn't be called that. I asked the Charity Commission, no. We had a board member who wanted us to be called something alphanumeric. And he really liked 1625, and we had a 2.5 hour merger meeting about the name. And in the end, I said, we'll be called 1625 Independent People, and I'll change it next year. But there we are. It's it, 1625 Independent People.
Well, there we go.
And access to housing gets worse and worse. We see it now in Bristol, more than 20,000 people on a waiting list. Affordability through
is that young? That's young people.
That's everybody. That's everybody on the waiting list. But you have to be able to get on the waiting list as well. I mean, I'll get the numbers wrong, but they probably let to about 1,500 young people a year through the housing waiting list. So that's all social housing. And I mean, affordability. When I first worked here, if you moved out, your rent would be paid if you were unemployed or in low paid work. It would cover the rent. Nowadays,
and you would get that level of support.
And you'd get a level of support. There were some people who moved on and still needed some support that wasn't quite being picked up by everything. There's always people
will
that
fall through than that. Yeah.
But now, if you're unemployed or low-paid employment and you're and you need to get housing benefit for rent, you'll get $511 a month. A room's $700, flats $1,500. So there's quite a shortfall. So one of the things we've done for years is work on affordable housing and how we produce more affordable housing for young people and kind of link that housing to work. Because from the bit about safety, emotional regulation, good role models, you also need a route to go and do something. And money is the easiest way to control your housing. Money generally comes from work for most people.
Yeah. And I mean, what's the first question everyone says when you meet somebody? What do you do? And as much as we shouldn't necessarily hold all our identity with what we do, it is a massive thing about what we do as people. Yeah. And if you don't have the option to go into something that you do, that you actually enjoy, that you're passionate about, that gives you some kind of purpose and, a level of income to survive, then, that's going to impact on everything else within your well-being and all the rest of it.
And that's an amazing way. You've stolen one of my speeches, actually, but that's an amazing way.
I think you said you come to one of ours. I don't know, whatever.
But explaining to people what you do, there's so much in self-worth. And actually, if you can't talk about if you're in a social situation, someone asks you that question and you say, well, I sit at home and I haven't got any money and I don't go to work. It's not very easy to feel that you can then easily engage in that conversation.
You're on a back foot straight away, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're not on the front. I mean, I suppose that does link with, and I can't remember if we said it now. We said it in our podcast we've done beforehand, which went on for about an hour. And we had a wicked conversation.
Cameras got sent up eventually, though, didn't they?
You said, didn't you, about the meeting and the fact that I was like, I was saying that I didn't know whether I wasn't used to talking to people of, I don't know, city leaders and people in a hierarchy, and I didn't know whether I come across in the right way. And I guess that worries the same kind of issue as a young person will face if they don't have any kind of self-belief or confidence in what they've got to offer, or maybe a pathway towards realizing something that matters to them. Then that same kind of like not standoffishness, but do you know what I mean? They're already at a deficit because they're not going to come across as the people that you want to employ because they're not there, are they? So it's like, how do we get over that hurdle? I could talk all day about how we could do that, but it's not for me to talk today.
Yeah.
That feels like it's something you're working with.
Yeah. So we do a lot of work around something, acceptance and commitment therapy. And there's a youth model called DNAV. And
what's that stand for?
Now you put me on the spot because I'll always get it right, but it's discoverer, noticer, I always forget, and I'll come back to advisor and values. Discoverer, noticer, advisor, and values. And when you think about anything in life, you're using any of those things. And values is what you strive for. So we all have self-doubt. We all have self-worth. But if you've been through lots of trauma, it's compounded and compounded and compounded. And when I first looked at ACT, one of the things that really resonated with me is they talked about passengers on the bus. So when you come and do anything, when I was driving here today, I'm like, why is he asking me? What have I got to say? Am I the right person to be on this thing?
Yes, you are.
All these kind of things. And they're there, and you know they're there. You notice them. But actually what you might do is just remove yourself from that a bit and say, yeah, I know that's there. But actually, if I want to be all right in this interview, and I might want to be all right in this interview, then probably what I need to do is think about things I might want to say, think about how I might relax, breathing, everything like that. And then I'll try all those because it will get me closer to getting people to understand what's important about supporting young people, what's important about what we do as an organisation, and what's important just generally about how we make lives better and change things, because we've got to change things. So what we do with young people is we work with them. They won't necessarily know in those words, but we'll work about how they're feeling, what it is they want to achieve. And then the idea with that is that you will always get people to move towards something they really value. And your value one day might be making money. If it's making money, that's all right. So what are you going to do to make money? Well, you're going to have to start with getting up in the morning, aren't you? And you're going to have to start with thinking about what your skills are and what jobs you might go for and doing all of that. And you make these little steps, and then you might have to go to that job interview, and then you might have to do that. And each time you do something, if it doesn't work, it's what do you learn about that and what does it feel
Reflective
like?
practice.
And it's all that recognising the things that get in the way, but also recognising what it feels to have made a positive step towards something you want to achieve. We all do that. There's people in our organisation, the head of HR, rules a lot of her life by the quadrant of what do you want, the DNAV, ACT quadrant, what do you want to achieve, what does it feel like when you're achieving things, what steps do you need to make? And for somebody who believed that talking about values was a load of rubbish when I was younger, actually, the more and more I think about it, the more important it is. And it's really important that, unlike me at that age, I know that I'll enjoy psychology. I know that I'll enjoy trying to change systems. And I know that the rebel bit of me will always quite enjoy overthrowing something that will make it better for young people in the future. So it's kind of recognising those things to help young people move and to get what they want.
It's interesting you say about values, and I'd say over God knows how many years of supporting young people, I just thought when you said then, inherently, I think everyone really has the right set of values, given the time. This is what feels like it's coming out from this. Given the time to support them, given the time to kind of break through some of those barriers and the traumas and the different things that are holding them back, given the time to build the relationship in a way that matters to them on a level which is safe for them, and then work towards things that, again, matter to them. I think most people generally do have the right values. It's when their situation is stuck in a certain position, or they don't feel like they've got the opportunities, or they can't get out of things, that then the decision making goes a bit pear-shaped. And does independent people now, because you were saying about like way back when about that amount of time to support those young people on that journey, to basically tailor things to support them to go in the direction they needed to. I mean, blatantly there's going to be ups and downs to all this, but time is huge. Do you still get that level of time now? Like to support those young people on that journey wherever they want to go? Because that's the key part, isn't it? Because you've already said that it could be one step forward, 3 steps back, but it's the learning from the mistakes and all that kind of stuff. Is that time still part of the process now?
So we get loads of different fundings and have loads of different programs. And some of them, the one I've just been talking about, is called Reboot, and it's the biggest efficacy trial ever in the UK to look at what works in getting young people into work. So the funders, the Youth Futures Foundation, are looking at what is it about the program that works. The first investment was a social investment, payment by results, and we smashed all the targets of getting young people into education and work. So it's like they want to see what does that. They care about young people as well, and they want to change the system. So that's what we're showing is it's about long-term commitment and long-term being there for young people. So that's what that program is. With other systems, as I've said, other services, some people are forced to have long-term support because they can't move on from housing because the housing system's blocked. But what we have done is we've brought loads of different funding scenarios in, so that even if a contract is about short-term results, there's the next step and the next step,
which would be funded by someone else. So you're connecting, you're bridging those different things. So it's still part of a pathway that's longer, but with like mosaic funding of them doing that bit, them doing that bit. That is a massive pain in the whatsits for smaller organisations. And I nearly fell off my chair earlier on when you floated out the amount of young people that you support now. I mean, please say a little bit about the size of this, because it's huge, isn't it? I in my ignorance, I didn't realise how big.
So we support 1,600 young people a year. There or thereabouts. We have had years in the past where we did different services where we supported up to 3,000 young people a year. And some of those people will move through different services. Some of them will come in at a different place, leave at a different place. We do everything from prevention of homelessness, going to schools with young people who've experienced homelessness and talk about the risk of leaving in a crisis. Because most of us leave home at some point, and most of us can leave home in a planned way. And it's not doing it in a planned way that can cause problems that can be there. For some people, it's not safe at home. So actually, the prevention, the best outcomes for any young person can be shown to be at home if it's safe and supportive. If it's not safe, then you need to do something else. And what we'll actually do is try and divert people from the homelessness route, because there are flaws in the way that supported housing is funded. There
isn't any.
So for years, again, that working with businesses, funders and stuff is setting up affordable housing that's linked to work, routes that you can do so you don't go down a supported housing route. But if you need to go down a supported housing route, then that's there, and there is supported accommodation for people coming in. Then we've got this move-on accommodation, and then we might provide support around mental health or well-being or healthy relationships, but particularly more and more around education and work, because the route out of homelessness is your self-worth, which you've talked about and you know fully about, but also the access to what you want to achieve in life. So you might come in at any of those, and some people will only come in the education and work bit. They'll be at risk of homelessness, or maybe at risk of homelessness.
But that might pull them out of it anyway, because it's just another way of doing it, isn't it?
But these days we're very much youth homelessness and care leavers organisation. So all of the people doing Reboot are care leavers from the 4 local authorities, and all of them will be supported longer term to get into education and work around values, because that's what's important. So, yeah. And to talk about journeys, when I started in 1996, when I believe you were in short pants at school or whatever it was, but there were 4.5 staff, and we supported, I don't know, maybe about 30 people, so maybe 50 a year. And now, and I was as young as some of the people that we supported. Now we've got about 170 staff. We do all of these services, which means I'm absolutely rubbish at changing anything around youth homelessness. but also none of the people we support were alive when I was born, which is a little bit frightening. So,
wow, time
yeah.
again.
So that's the journey. That's a bit of a journey and a bit of time.
So from that journey then, and I think we probably touched on it a little bit already. If we have, move me on. But from that beginning of that journey to now, obviously things have grown massively. There's two things really. What was working really well back then compared to now? So things we could learn. And what was the real key steps, the milestones in that journey to support you to grow to this situation, to be able to support more young people? I mean, I have a little bit of a I don't know, maybe it's a personal thing, this whole thing around like growth, like just that word I think gives me the, because of the, not coming from a background of business and whatever, and people, growing and running things and all the rest of it, that whole thing of like, and as voluntary sector, as you know, suddenly your cap gets bigger of what you need to fund this growth. And it's bloody difficult enough running something with 5 people, 10 people, whatever, that has a big difference, let alone 100 odd staff. So I guess the first thing would be, let's start with the things that are working well back then that could help inform what's going on now, or maybe and the things that are working maybe really well now.
So I mentioned it a bit, but joint working and realising that there's lots of people out there that you need to work together, but that means you have to have time to meet them, and there's no time in people's lives. So
and the priorities.
I do a different role now. I'm not doing direct work, but when I did, I was mixing with all the other direct workers, working out what was going on and working out what needed to be done, and you'd do it together. And you'd all be there at the end of the phone. We had phones in my day. It wasn't before phones. And then, actually, maybe it was. and we worked in areas, so we understood the areas. And then as money gets tighter, you get centralised. And then you need to have great people doing all the things that you might have been doing or they might have been doing individually around you to build that. So as you grow, we've only grown, and I'm only sat here because I've had brilliant people around me. And, that you need the brains of what can do, how you can link up, how you can get the income in, how you can change all of that. You need people who really know about looking after your staff and making sure your staff are all right. You need people who can manage the finances and make sure that that's there. And then as you grow, you need people who, people know me. I still quite like getting involved, but people who can run all the operations, and you need to have people that can be involved in all the different
already
areas.
I'm just like, oh, bloody hell. That's a lot. I've got a funny feeling your mathematics might have helped. Like, you saying that, because things don't grow, do they? They don't grow unless you put together the building blocks of what you're talking about.
Yeah, some of it's luck. You have luck by the people.
What was the luck you had? I mean,
so the people around me, I do everything on other people's coattails, don't I? No, but the people around you is what makes a difference.
I think you're doing yourself a disservice.
I can go away, and they can run all that and grow all that, and there'll be new services in, and just brilliant people, but people with a shared passion. And the other thing, when you grow, it's harder to keep that
culture, maybe.
Yeah. So if I wanted to say what I think I'm quite good at. And everyone who works for me will tell you it's wrong. But I think I could understand where everyone was, know a bit about everyone, and lead as a kind of collegiate example. And as you grow, there are people, I walk in the office sometimes, I go, who's that? It's a big thing to have that kind of change in an organisation. What works? Time with young people. What works is understanding that it's not just about housing. It's not just about money. It's not just about mental health. It's not anything like that. It's about how can you make someone safe and be able to work out what they need holistically, and who's the best place to do that. And you end up developing services because there's no one to deliver that. So if we talk about, we've got money for housing, we've got money for education and work, things like that. Well, the thing that we've always struggled with is people coming through trauma. The trauma manifests, and it manifests in how well they feel mentally. And that needs support. And if you're a young person, the statutory support thresholds have gone like that. So, and if you were in crisis, you need to go to an appointment. If you don't turn up 3 times, you don't get a service. And we know that doesn't work, but that's what we still do.
People are forgotten about, and they feel forgotten about, and right at the sharp end of things, they have been forgotten about, and that is exactly what we see, and it must be what you guys see as well.
Yeah.
And not everyone can get seen by independent people. Do you know what I mean? Like there's way more. I mean, I can think of exact times I still sometimes give young people your number. You must think, bloody hell, why have I got... Yeah, there's other people who can do with that now.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, the culture of contracts made that worse because your outcomes are that you've moved someone on. They're not that you continue to make sure that that person's all right. So you can have organisations that are working, and I've seen it when I did kind of work with, other organisations meeting complex and multiple needs. It's like your result is, we've got that result. Hey, now it's somebody else's problem. Let's get on with it. And that
from the point of view,
ecosystem
I mean, I know what you mean. From what I'm saying, it's literally the point of we're not working with them, and we don't have any capacity or any funding, and they're at absolute breaking point. And it's who's the right people.
Yeah.
And
but that's what we've been driven to, and it shouldn't be like that. You should be able to say, hey, Dom, there's this person we'd like to work with. We'll work together with them for the next 6 months.
How would that
3
happen?
months.
Because that feels like that's part of the story. How would that happen? Because I don't know if it's people painting a real kind of rosy picture with rose-tinted glasses of back in the day with all these different youth centres and these connected services and provisions that supported young people in lots of different ways. It was all place-based, people with all the different localised knowledge, all that kind of stuff. If it really was like that, and that is the panacea or whatever, I don't know if I said that word the right way. How do we get back to that? So it takes away the strain and the stress when the organisations trying to just survive and support people best they can, to having something which gives us a bit more leeway to support those young people based on the challenges they've got and not having to fit it into like 12 weeks. These regimented things that funders are saying, probably because they don't have the money or maybe they don't understand necessarily the reality. I don't know.
I mean, fundamentally, there needs to be more money.
But money's not just the answer. I mean, answer that and then I'll throw something at you.
So it's not the only answer, but everybody's at a rush to achieve things and everything's got the thing that they need to achieve. So if you're a funder, you need to get this contract out. You're told the only way to do this safely so you won't be challenged is listening to all the solicitors' advice, listening to the procurement advice. Solicitors will tell you how to deal with no risk or little risk. Procurement people will tell you how to follow a procurement process. What you're not doing is looking at, with people that know, including the people that will receive those services, what is it really that's needed? Let's stop this system. Let's wait a minute and let's work out the best way to deliver that in a way that isn't rushed, culture-driven. But to do that, that's why I say fundamentally money. To do that, the funders, mainly local authorities in this case, or health or whoever else, need to feel that they've got the space and the time to approach it in that way. And they don't feel that. They're rushed. I don't know how many people you've been to meet recently in the local authority.
I don't get the chance. I'll be honest with you.
Another one.
I'm listening to what you just said then. I mean, I'm not going to something like put this as a self-promotion thing for stuff that GC does, but
you don't get to see anyone.
You've been. I don't. I'm literally flat out doing the things that need to happen to make this stuff happen. But interestingly, what you just said then, spending like 7 years to develop, part of some of the stuff we do. We deliver lots of other things, but that GAP program in all its different kind of models. Is absolutely based on the wants and needs of local people. But the trouble is, when do you normally get the time to do that? Well, we don't get the time to do that, but we know that's what's needed to mean that something will really be best placed to be based on wants and needs of local people. And that's why it's worked. Then the problem is that you spend all your time doing that, but then really, like the story and the journey you've just gone on over X amount of years, really, that's probably, we need to scale the impact of what we're doing. But it's then finding the balance of being able to then meet the right people that can support that because we've got all the outcomes and we've got all the impact and the show reels of the young people. And basically, we've made a difference to the young people, the main thing. And they can tell you that themselves. And they can absolutely pinpoint.
And I know that before even looking at it because I know what you do and I know the basis of the work. So
but how the hell, I suppose in the situation that we're in, do you have to kind of grow for that to kind of be better? No, but it does impact on more people. So that would be great. And hopefully there wouldn't be more people that would need that help. But as we know, there is more and less services. So it's like, how do other organisations then go on that journey? I am going off. But how do they go on that journey to increase the impact?
Yeah.
Once they know that the stuff that they're doing has been successful and it's really based on need, because that is what a lot of organisations will struggle with that are really trying to do the right thing. Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's all right. So, partly by luck, I told you about transitional housing benefit. That was a big growth that was luck that just happened about a change in government policy. Partly, you need people who've got the time to not have to be absorbed in that operation and have the time to go and have the discussions with the people who are making funding decisions and
you have to pay for
and
that,
other people, and that costs money.
Yeah.
And that's why at time over the years, Vosca, for example, have looked about how they backfill people to come to strategy meetings and to work with the local authority on strategy and consultation. I mean, that never got anywhere long term, but the reality is we all give our time for nothing. If we want to achieve something like that, we have to give our time for nothing to do things. And we have to find somehow in an organisation of freeing up someone who can make those links, those connections and those discussions with it. But funders, businesses, individuals, whatever it is. And so at some point you have to make a jump, and unless you're lucky, and say, this is how we're going to spend some of our time. And we realise that's time away from the delivery. But we need to do this because actually young people's needs aren't being met, and we could meet these bits of it. And I guess that's how we've always looked at things over time.
Yeah, I suppose, and the other thing that I was going to say when you were talking about the growth situation, what we've heard a lot from a lot of people in connected, youth community, various different things, even education, mainstream education, is the situation with staffing and the people with those kind of those skills to do the work. Now, how do you find that you've obviously grown massively, and I guess based on what you said before and off camera and lots of other times, really you started off as a youth worker, like within those roles. Yeah. I can't believe that you're now employing youth workers because they're with all those different skills that come with that. Yeah. So who are you employing? Do you know what I mean? And what's their backgrounds? It must be a lot wider. Yeah. Which must bring some...
So big changes, and a big change about having important people around you in your kind of organisational life is that years ago, I used to be a youth work assessor. We'd take people on placement. People come on placement with us. They'd understand the organisation, and they or other people on their course would probably apply, and we'd employ youth workers and sometimes social work, students. And that word was all there, and there was a whole sector, and there was a whole lot of training. And that worked, and that was easy, and you get great people through that with great skills that knew how to work with young people, knew how to do things. And then slowly, as we've grown and had more and more roles, we've moved from a kind of what's your experience and training to what are your competencies. So really looking at people's competencies and values in work. So you're taking on people that have a passion for working, young people want to make a difference, can demonstrate some of those skills that you would have demonstrated in a youth work qualification or a similar work qualification. And then we invest the time in making sure that they're all right in doing their job. And we do lots of things like group reflective practice to make sure that people are learning. Since COVID, with hybrid working, new people coming in, they don't have so many people around them to absorb all that knowledge and learn in that way. And so there's a whole kind of look at how
it's very difficult to learn, face-to-face work and all the different things that you learn, body language and a million other things. Not doing that in person, I think, is definitely like a negative. Don't get me wrong, like obviously there's some benefit to it for organisations to be able to deliver it easier and various other stuff, but I think you need to be with people. People that are learning how to support people need to be learning this with people. Yes, you can deepen your learning in other ways, but ultimately, that feels like the thing.
And I've still got friends today who came on youth work placement, who've gone off and they've done different things in life, don't work with us anymore, but just seeing it was that bit about spending time, being able to, start working with young people, learn those things in a non-pressured, tight contract situation. It was having that space there, and then really worked.
It's huge, isn't it? I think now, this is just like the situation we've been through, specifically with the year-long gap program or the shortened version mini gap. We've just done some youth gap with teenagers, and you've got some of those young leaders that are 17 to 30 that done the year-long and the mini gap programs, and they're in a situation that, as the whole thing was developed so it'd be open, so people could go into opportunities that matter to them. So that could have been the RAF, that could have been a degree in psychology, that could have been a catering apprenticeship, that could have been youth community work. It was a million different things, and that was the beauty of it. That whole kind of skill set and the package of learning, experiential learning, supports people to go in the way they want to go. Yeah. But we did know from the beginning, as you know, that all of that rich learning would support any work.
Yes.
People focused.
Yeah.
I guess the difficulty we've had now, if I'm honest, the people that have gone through that process, that are like, we're lit up with the potential of supporting others that might have been through this, similar challenges and had similar lived experiences. Those opportunities don't really exist. So we've had people, we've tried to, we can't offer full-time roles for some of these people. Those roles don't necessarily exist in other places. Maybe they do in other organisations that are kind of interconnected, with youth work. And that feels like that's part of the system that's broken. Maybe there's not enough connection, like you said, to know about those other opportunities. And I wonder whether, and I'll chat to you off camera, there's something we're trying to develop now, which is basically a train-the-trainer model to try and kind of increase that impact with some of those young leaders that showed that interest, that want to be those changes of tomorrow for other people, that the roles didn't necessarily, they weren't there. They couldn't survive. So they had to go off and do other jobs they don't really want to do. But for them to then go off in pairs and deliver another mini gap, in targeted communities to try and increase that impact. And I wonder whether there's something in that might fit in with what you were talking about with independent people and others.
Yeah. And
then there's a gateway for them to go into roles in those organisations, because there's super talent that I've seen absolutely flourish. And it is painful to see that they then go into other. And I'm not saying, look, I've done loads of stuff, whatever, scaffolding, cleaning, blah, blah, blah. And there's nothing wrong with any of those jobs. But they've had to go into things that really isn't utilising their talents and the skills that they've learnt. Yeah. And it feels like that's the bit we're on. And it feels like it probably could support organisations
so there's a bit about talent mapping as well, isn't there? And actually, is there anything out there? If it was connected enough, and could we find that? And are there employers that will give opportunities like that, I guess? But it is a small field, and we have it's a completely, slightly separate subject, but we have an education system that doesn't work very well with the people on the edge of education. And
or in it, depending on what your situation is.
And we, in terms of growth, we now run the Youth Education Service, which is a functional skills provider of English Maths up to level 2. And functional skills was introduced by the government to be closer to apprenticeships and things like that. But there's a whole system change model in that needs to go, where we'll teach people and they'll be getting ready to go into their apprenticeship. And they get told to go back to school and take GCSEs in subjects they haven't been taught in.
And that might have been the thing that was holding them back in the first place. So allow people to work towards the thing that is their interest, that is their passion. Not everyone's going to end up being a blooming dancer or whatever. But I mean, working towards that will give them the belief in themselves to feel like they can achieve other things. I just feel like we just need to somehow take away some of the rigidness of these systems and enable us to actually, the teachers, the youth workers, the other people that are there to support them, to be able to creatively support those young people to work towards the things that matter to them. And then you're suddenly going to create a whole load of role models, raise a whole load of aspirations, create a workforce that is absolutely raring to go. Yeah. There's going to be negatives that come from that, but we learn from that. I just feel like we can't keep putting everyone into boxes, because those boxes aren't working.
Yeah. No, agreed. Agreed. When are we changing it?
Well, I'm up for changing it now, and I feel like we've done something that has changed. But, like in a small organisation, we're very hamstrung on what we can do, but we've created a model that has changed things for those young people. But the next steps for some of them that want to get into youth community work and stuff like that aren't there.
Let's talk after. We can work some things out of how to change it.
Sorry about this. I get passionate and I go on.
That's brilliant.
But I want to know a bit more about you. So I know that, it's been amazing what you've done with independent people and the amount of young people that supported. Like I said to you before off camera, I remember hearing about independent people a long time ago when I was working at the mill in Easton. And I've only ever heard positive things. And I, like I said to you, things get bigger, people moan and groan and people talk about things. And I haven't heard any negative. So, I mean, I can only say to you, without blowing smoke up, well, there must be, because nothing's perfect. So that feels to me like it must be a positive thing. So you're obviously doing great stuff. But I always see the creative things that you're doing to try and kind of bring an income to continue doing the work. Now, You're doing someone else at the moment, aren't you?
Yeah. So I'm with a group of people. I'm walking Kilimanjaro in March. So there's a Bevan Britain group of solicitors, local solicitors who we were the charity of the year for, and they really wanted to do this. And then a mate of mine, when it was advertised, said to me, "Would you do this as well?" And no, my knee's too bad for that. Forgetting that she trained as an occupational therapist, so she sent me loads of exercises and then said, "You haven't got an excuse." So now I'm doing it. I'm walking Kilimanjaro, 5 days up, 2 days down. 50% of people that
those 2 days down.
50% of people make it because of altitude sickness mainly.
Okay.
I mean, I'm doing a lot of training, so it won't be training, but it could be altitude sickness because if it gets you, it gets you, and it gets athletes, it gets different people at different times. So.
Wow. I mean, you're challenging yourself, aren't you? That's the big key thing. Like you're doing the training, you can only do what you can do.
It's getting a bit closer now. It feels more challenging.
Look, we can tell by his face. What could people do then if they want to donate towards this?
Well, they could scan this, but they could just go on our website and see, or I've got Just Giving page. It's I mean, we're all organisations that need the money that we're not getting through contracts, and there are multiple ways that we all have of getting money, and you need it massively for your GAP program to change young people's lives, to get people who can work in our field again, trained to work in our field again.
Which supports everyone's lives ultimately, which is the crazy thing.
And we need it to provide the holistic, all-round support, and it's it's all there. It's never been on my bucket list to walk a mountain like Kilimanjaro, but it's pretty exciting now. It's pretty exciting. Yeah.
Well, I wish you.
And I wear technical clothes. Look at this.
Oh no, I did notice. Yeah. You've got the same coat as me, actually, heading over there. Snap. I guess for the thing for me is as well is like, again, chatting to various other people, and I think probably without like putting words into your mouth, yes, we know that intervention is huge in youth and community work, and it doesn't necessarily exist now, and it would hopefully stem the flow of people that we'd be working with later on in life because of the support that there would be there. It feels like all these conversations with people, it feels like we've we don't have to buy a new axe. We just need to sharpen the head of the one. We've got the learning, we've got the understanding. We just need to invest in that and put the structures together. And then it would mean that maybe, it would become easier for us to do the targeted work for those right at the sharp end of things. Yeah. And there wouldn't be so many.
Yeah.
So it would be making it more possible.
Absolutely. Support at the right time. Stopping it before it's a crisis.
Exactly. And we have all the indicators, don't we? Yeah. To know when that happens. Do you feel like there's a place for what you guys do and homelessness and those kind of things to be government run? Or do you feel like that is not something that would necessarily work now? Or
So we're part of a national group called Every Youth, and it is local or regional youth homelessness organisations. And what we know is that there's local solutions for local problems. And in Bristol, we've talked about affordability and access to housing and work and things like that. You go to another place in the country and there isn't an affordable housing crisis. There are properties, but there's no work. And there might be more, kind of family issues and poverty and things like that. Currently, we've got some of the biggest poverties in the country in Bristol, but you might have whole cities or whole towns of it. And so I don't think that it being government run is the answer. What I do think is that maybe saying everyone needs to have a house is the answer, and everyone needs to have the right education and the right support.
And does that come from government?
And that has to be pushed from somewhere. I mean, there is national policy.
It's not going to be the voluntary sector because everyone's fighting to try and do what they're doing now, are they? So that's pretty widespread, what you're talking about, that change.
But when you say, what's the thing with growth and all of those kind of things and concentration on doing things, there's an absolute place for small local organisations, but there's an absolute place for organisations to raise up what the issues are. And sometimes that's an organisation that's doing delivery. Quite often it should be because they're the closest to what's really going on. And sometimes it's others who might be a bit removed. But all of it needs changing for young people. I mean, we've got young people growing up who have got more burdens than I had as a child. There's more pressure, more looking, more intensity. There's less chance of getting housing. They're not going to move to another city, getting all their rent paid without having to work and doing education or not doing education, getting up and watching Neighbours, in my case. That's not there. So that whole thing needs to change, and we all need to be a part of pushing what that change is. And when you said everyone's got values that are right at the time, I mean, we might look at some world leaders or big business leaders and wonder what their values are that are leading things. But generally,
if they had the support when they were younger, maybe their values would be slightly different.
Maybe it's trauma. But there are loads of people out there that want to make a difference. And what organisations have struggled with over the years, and why I'm so pleased with what we can do, and particularly, through as I've said, Jamie is amazing at talking like this, is seeing what the joint outcome is and understanding that you can go into a room and talk to somebody and actually their values are probably cross over about what should happen with gap young people, with homeless young people, with young people looking for work. And you can find that joint spot. Not only can you find a way of supporting people, but you're getting a message up of the things that need to change. And I can't remember what the question was because I've gone off on one of my things. But
no,
Dougie, what was the question?
No. I think what you just said, Dan, is what you wanted to say, and that is the kind of stuff that actually matters. To be totally honest with you, there's no one pill, is there, that's going to solve all these different things? And yes, it does need to be joined up. And I guess, what comes out of what you just said then is that everyone's always talks about when they're older and they pass on the baton to someone else, that hopefully society's in a better place. I think most people can openly and honestly say, like, whether it be in government or any other role, is that the case now?
Yeah.
No. So we have got a lot of work to do. But I think we have all the skills to do it. And we have the people, and we have the organisations, and we have the potential. We just need to value what those things are and invest in it, and then create the system that can sustain it, which is going to last a lot longer than 4 years. And it has to be cross-party done. It has to be like a bigger piece of work. But thankfully, there are organisations like you guys that have managed to kind of improve and inspire and engage more young people over time because of how you've done it. So your stories are huge to help others maybe navigate that tricky kind of situation, to support more young people. So I thank you for coming on and sharing all that kind of stuff.
Thank you for letting me.
No, it's been a pleasure. And I'm going to hit you with an absolute cracker, which might which might make you cry or just walk out. So the podcast is called What Really Matters.
Yeah.
And we ask everyone at the end of the podcast about something that really matters to them. Yeah. The thing, if I said to you, what really matters to you, whether it be professionally, personally, whatever it is, it doesn't matter how you take that question. What's the first thing that comes into your head?
Changing systems that don't work. And from what we've just said, no one wants things to go wrong for young people. They really don't. But all the systems that we've got, that school system, all the other systems, they're not working. They're creating more pressure. What we've said several times in this is time, togetherness, and change all those things to make it what we all want, rather than each little individual bit. So what makes a difference, or what really matters to me, is making sure the status quo changes with young people involved to make the systems work, because that's what we all want.
And I guess if there's people with those levers on this, I don't know who they would be and what that is, then get in touch. But I'm sure you're probably talking to people at that certain levels anyway.
Some people,
about this kind of stuff. Thanks for coming on, Dom.
Thank you.
Look forward to getting this out, and I look forward to chatting to you off air.
Yeah.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks.